Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Shut Up David series. I'm David Wallach, Principal Consultant at New View Safety Coach, and I'm bringing you guests from all over the world to talk to you about all things New View safety, safety 2, safety differently, whatever you want to call it, and organizational coaching. Today, we've got a guest all the way from New Zealand, Craig Marriott. Is going to be joining us today. So Craig is a renowned safety expert with over 25 years of experience in high-risk industries like nuclear and petrochemical. Craig is the founder of Craig Marriott Consulting, a company dedicated to challenging the status quo, and that's important, we'll probably come back to that later, challenging the status quo and bringing a fresh perspective to safety practices. He's also the author of Challenging the Safety Quo, which is a book which translates safety theory into practice and adds more value to current safety practices. With a focus on safety leadership and culture, Craig believes that great leadership and committed people working with efficient systems are the key to enhancing safety performance. So with his extensive knowledge and expertise, Craig is on a mission to raise the bar for safety standards across industries. Join us now as Craig shares his insights and best practices and real-world examples that can help make workplaces safer for everybody. So please welcome Craig Marriott. Craig, great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. No worries at all. You were just saying you're currently in wind down mode because you're heading over to the UK for a month soon. Is that correct?
Yeah. So a month's holiday. It's not a business trip, although there's one or two people I'm trying to catch up with on there. But it's a holiday, a break, and go back and see the family.
Well, you certainly picked a better time of year since the weather's starting to turn down here. In the southern hemisphere, you'd be heading to the northern hemisphere for those long, lazy evenings.
It should be nice. We actually last time we went over in December. We went back for Christmas, which is always slightly hard. But actually, the weather was beautiful, which was. You don't get those sort of crisp, cold mornings here in New Zealand that you get every now. So,
what end of the UK your family at? The north or south?
Midlands and north. So,
gotcha.
Derby upwards. Yeah.
That's where I'm from as well. I'm from Newcastle, Sunderland area in the northeast, and lived over the west as well. But enough about me anyway. This is the Shut Up David series, so let's just take a leaf out of my book then and say, right, okay. So as you know, these podcasts, these videos, they go all over the world. So what I like to do when guests first come on is to give a brief introduction to themselves and how you got to where you're at, basically. So people who don't know you, which most people in the safety world will have heard of you to some degree, but people who aren't familiar with you have a bit of context to who you are and what you kind of bring to the table.
Yeah, okay. So I actually I got into safety by accident. A lot of people say this, I got into safety by accident.
That was me as well.
In my case, I did that sort of literally. I was having an interview while I was still an undergraduate at university and fell off the chair. The back of my chair broke while I was in the interview, and I fell off backwards, sort of landed in a heap. And that actually really broke the ice in the interview. So we had a really good chat and conversation. And I left. I got a degree in physics. And when I left university, I went to work in the nuclear industry in the UK. So I ended up in the sort of safety and risk team, writing safety cases for nuclear facilities. So primarily reprocessing facilities, but also after a few years, when I was a bit more experienced, I led the safety case team that wrote the facility safety case for building HMS Astute, which is the latest class of nuclear submarine in the UK naval fleet. So some interesting sounding things in that space.
Yep.
But it was mostly.
I'm assuming a lot of that was at Sellafield.
Yes. Yeah. Most of that was at Sellafield. Yeah. So that's for people that don't know, that's a big sort of nuclear reprocessing and waste storage facility up in the sort of northwest of England. So that was kind of heavily engineering. It's closer to process safety in the sort of process industries than it is to conventional occupational health and safety. So lots of quantification, lots of fault trees and risk criteria and 10 to the minus 7 likelihoods of fatalities and all that kind of good stuff. And I did that for 17 years, and then decided to make a move to New Zealand with my family. Now, New Zealand is famously non-nuclear. They won't even let nuclear-powered ships dock in New Zealand waters. There was a stoush with Americans some years ago. So there's no nuclear facilities over here to do that sort of work with.
So you're one of the only countries in the world that doesn't tolerate nuclear after spending 17 years in the nuclear industry.
Yeah. Writing more fault trees might not have been top of my list of priorities when I chose that. But I did similar work in the oil and gas sector over here for a short while, and then the company that I was with, I got seconded into their health and safety manager role for a while. So I transitioned into that more traditional occupational health and safety, and it's a very different world to process safety and nuclear safety in safety cases. So when I came into that role, after getting sort of familiarized a little bit with what they did, I started to kind of question some of the things that were being done, because they just didn't make much sense to me. Which is just a different perspective.
How is that? So you come from this highly process-led environment, and then so you transitioned, or you were put into this safety manager role. You said it was very different. Like, in what sense was it different?
So the approach to so the example I give usually is so I left British Nuclear Fuels, and I worked for a specialist safety engineering consultancy back in the UK. And we had people doing safety cases for the process industries, for oil and gas, for transport, and for nuclear. Some really smart people, been doing this sort of risk assessment, risk management for years. And we did have some occupational safety stuff included in our safety cases, but not a lot. And so we decided we ought to learn a little bit more about it. So we got somebody to come in and deliver it was an IOSH leading safely course, which was a 2-day course that IOSH used to run, which is actually pretty good. And it was a really good session. The trainer, she was really good. But then and I know this is going a bit over old ground for new view people, but it's just sort of sets the context. She put up the accident triangle with the numbers on it.
Oh yeah.
So, with apologies to Carsten Busch, not the careful thoughts about what Heinrich was talking about, but here's the numbers. If we focus on these ones here, at the bottom of the triangle, the ones at the top of the triangle look after themselves. That kind of concept.
Yeah.
And she put this up, and literally the entire room just kind of exploded. And it was just, that's nonsense. What makes no sense? There's no causal link between the top and the bottom. It's not. There's nothing apparent. And so, and it was just because our approach in process safety is you spend a lot of time saying, well, okay, what are the hazards that can cause the most damage? Mm-hmm. What's the significant events that can cause multiple fatalities, blow things up? And then you focus sort of exclusively on those.
Right, which is the exact by default opposite. Would forget of everything at the bottom of the triangle. Yeah.
Yeah, which is the exact opposite of let's look at everything and sort of the big things look at yourself. So you literally come from the exact opposite perspective.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff I think in conventional health and safety that has fallen out of that viewpoint. So a lot of the stuff that we do around incident reporting, around incident investigation, around statistical, recordable case frequency rates, all that kind of stuff, I think is kind of driven out of that same sort of mindset.
Okay.
And then other things like when you spent weeks and weeks and weeks doing a justification, and you've just spent several $1 million or pounds on a facility to reduce the risk to the public from 10 to the -5 to 10 to the -6 per year, the idea of chasing zero targets seems kind of nonsensical.
Right. Okay. So in the nuclear industry, especially in the UK, this whole philosophy of zero harm is what is it? It's non-existent. It's ridiculed.
Well, in that context, within the safety case world, we would, because we were dealing with, in order to for public safety, you had to have you kind of a broadly acceptable cutoff is something like 1 in a million likelihood of an event. And that's how you assess it. I always say it's not. I don't think those are real world probabilities. I always think they're actually just a calculation against a set of numbers that we've decreed as acceptable. I would never hold my hand up and say that's how often that's going to occur.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's one of the inherent issues though with risk matrices, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've seen people write risk assessments with the probability of the event is so low that you're more likely for the sun to blow up and destroy the planet than you are for and you think, oh, it doesn't make a lot of sense on rational grounds. So the idea that you could drive to zero on something when we're dealing with 1 in a million chance and we're still trying to get ever closer, yes, you're kind of approaching that asymptotically towards zero, but you just never get there. And so so I started to kind of challenge those kind of things.
Okay.
And that round about 2012, say, 2013, I moved into a different role with another organization, and I started to kind of note down some thoughts, ostensibly to do a presentation, kind of a myths of safety, or things I think we get wrong in safety. And so I started writing this as a presentation, and then I just kind of kept writing, and it turned into a book. And so that's kind of where my book came from. I never sat down to write a book about this. It just sort of came out.
See, I love that. You see, I've written plenty of presentations, and none of mine just kept on writing and turned into a book. You must. Can I finish it? Can I finish that? It's like, is that when I've got a word count for an essay at university and I say, okay, 3,500 words. At 3,500 words, I stop, regardless of whether it's the end of the sentence or not. But you obviously were learning a lot, and you were picking up a lot of differences within these two realms of nuclear safety and non-nuclear safety, and the difference between them and areas for improvement. I'm assuming that's what you're picking up on.
Yeah, and some of it wasn't, necessarily driven out of that nuclear experience. Some of it was just taking a critical thinking lens, and playing it over, some of those things. And I did the usual sort of things that most people did. I remember writing letters for workers to take to the doctor when they got injured, that talked about alternative duties are available, and we want to get them back fast, and all that kind of stuff that we've sort of all been through before I knew any better, I guess.
Awesome.
And so then I did that.
No, sorry, go on.
No, so I was going to say, then having got into that kind of safety manager role, I then just progressed doing that in 2 or 3 different organizations, and then started consulting, and just gradually kind of built that experience base until I set up my own business a couple of years ago.
So, okay, thank you for that context and that background. I know, because of our previous talk last week, your interests now are around soft skills of safety leaders within organizations, and what they need in order to become better at what they do. That's 180 from the process world that you come from, isn't it? Really?
It is, yeah. It is in some respects, yeah.
So what motivated you to go down that path?
Well, so that's not exclusively what I do, but what I tend to do is focus at that senior level within organizations. So we still do quite a lot of technical work and reviews, and system management things and all those kind of things. But one of the things that I realized when dealing with organizations is that there's very, very few safety managers, sort of long-term safety people, if you like, sitting around executive tables. There's a few places here and there where they have a general manager of safety that's part of the executive team, and lots of places, of course, they make the safety manager report into the chief executive as a kind of symbolically important, but they're still not actually around the table when it's executive conversations and discussions. So, and looking at that, it struck me that actually that's probably because in safety we're not very good at stepping outside of our area of expertise. You can't live in an executive management team if you're not bringing a broad range of skills to help the entire business, because when you're at that executive level, you've got to be a generalist, right? You've got to contribute in lots of different ways. And I don't think in safety we prepare our people very well for doing that. We tend to be a little bit insular and a little bit focused just on the safety side of things.
Gotcha. Okay. And this skill set so there's that dual approach then that you have, is you're still interested in that process side of things, but you are working in the area as well as to, okay, well, how do we, and correct me if I'm wrong here, how do we have these people who are responsible for safety? It's their title within the organization. How do we give them the skill set to better be able to communicate on a holistic level within the organization, which is what safety requires? Is that, in a nutshell, what you were saying?
Yeah, so it's kind of a bit of both, a bit more than that, I think. So in order to get the best outcome for the safety outcomes that you're looking for, you need to be able to bring those people on board with you. So you need to be able to couch your argument or your message in terms which is going to resonate with them and is going to be useful for them, so they understand it and they buy into it and they support it and all that good stuff. But it's a two-way street, right? So it's no good having a really compelling discussion about what your safety requirements are if then the business of the meeting turns to marketing or to communications or to operations or to engineering or asset management, whatever it might be, and you just sit there and don't contribute because you're the safety person. Right? So you need to be able to say, well, what can I bring across that range of things that actually assists the whole organization in moving forward?
Okay, so the discussion around risk is across every facet of the organization, not just around one particular siloed area, essentially.
Yeah, of course it is, and everything else as well. And I would like to think I've got no expertise in marketing, for example, but I would like to think I've got enough knowledge and enough critical thinking capability of contributing to those discussions as well. And so you bring value to that executive table. Yeah, that's beyond just your discipline.
So, is this where we lead into this 2-day workshop that you've put together for safety leaders, looking at the soft skills needed by safety leaders for negotiation, influencing skills, and listening skills? Is that what this 2-day workshop is all about? Trying to give those skill sets to those safety leaders. Walk us through what that 2-day workshop might look like for these leaders.
Yeah. So what I did was I sort of sat down and I worked through and thought, well, what is it that you need to be good at? What is it how do you need to put yourself forward? And so I kind of focused this around your ability to influence within the organization.
Yep.
And there's lots of different ways that you can do that, obviously, but the way I've chosen, I've taken the Aristotle's rhetorical triangle.
Right? I heard of that one.
So in the rhetorical triangle is basically says, if you want to influence, you want to create a strong argument which people will respond to. There are three components to that, basically. The first one is credibility and trust in the person who's giving the message. Right? So your personal credibility and have people can trust that you're doing the right things. The second one is effectively the strength of your argument.
Okay.
And the third one is your ability to engage the emotions of your audience.
Ooh, okay.
So those three things combined provide a compelling argument in order to get your point. So what I do is I basically take those three things in turn, and I say, what does that mean in the context of the safety manager trying to influence within their organization, trying to gain traction? So we talk a little bit around. So in the strength of your argument, we talk a little bit around, well, what is your argument?
Yeah.
Do you have a clear proposition that you're trying to sell to people and what you're trying to tell them about? And we go through some of that new view thinking and, what's the difference between HOP and safety differently and safety two? And what are the common themes and how do you do that? And how do you make a coherent argument out of all that stuff?
Yeah.
So that you've got a strong argument to make. And then we go into the piece about, and in doing that, so we talk about that journey, but I also go into one or two areas where I think we're not strong where we should be strong necessarily, and something like risk management is one of those. So with that background in quantitative risk management that I've got, which admittedly, it's not perfect, but there's lots of things we do in risk, I think, which we're really bad at. The way people apply the risk matrix, the way they use it, understanding of how much you can reduce risks and how, and those kind of things. I think we should do better. So there's some
of the consequences and everything. Really, it's all very subjective, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and try to but if you want to. Again, if you want to influence, you've got to have a deeper understanding of that subjectivity so that you can argue from a position of strength. Otherwise, it's easy to be undermined.
Yes.
So there is some sort of technical component to it, kind of hard skills, if you like.
Yep.
And then we move on to the engaging with your audience piece, which is how do you understand your audience? Do you know, if you're going to engage with your board, do you know what their drivers are? Do you know what their job is? Do you actually know what they're going to respond to?
Yeah.
And what they're looking for from you? And what do you do about building up your credibility with them? Because without credibility, they'll never listen to what you've got to say.
No.
So I mean, if you go in as a consultant into an organization, you're going with a certain degree of credibility because you're an outside third party, and you must have come through some sort of selection process to get there. So you kind of come with a little bit of credibility. But if you go out and if you say I want to hire a David Wallage or a David Proven or some other David to come into my organization, you come in with a reputation, right?
Yep.
But that reputation is founded on years and years and years and years of work. It's you're not just providing an argument on the day as to why what you're saying is correct. And so if you're a safety manager internally, you've got to step back and say, well, if I'm going to be presenting in 6 months' time or 12 months' time, what groundwork do I have to put in now in order to establish that reputation internally so that they'll listen to me when I make a point that maybe they don't want to listen to, or maybe I'm trying to make some change.
Gotcha.
So we start to step back a little bit and think about what does that look like, and what techniques and steps can we do to do that.
This brings to mind that saying proverb. I think it's probably a proverb. You can't be a prophet in your own land, really. Which is, the people always value, as you alluded to then, people always value that. We brought someone in and we paid them more than what we usually pay someone to give us the same. To give us the same answers, essentially, because that's a large part of consulting, isn't it? I mean, I remember, so many times being asked to go to organisations to help with X, Y, or Z, to do with safety, and the majority of the time I'd spend going talking to people who already work there and who've been, saying, okay, well, what do you guys think? And all I ended then, very loosely. All I end up then doing is retranscribing that, repackaging it, and giving it back to the organization, which they think is amazing, but really it's already come from their people.
Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I often say this to safety managers: half my job is coming in and saying the same thing that you're doing, but they'll listen to me because I come in a shiny suit.
Exactly. Exactly.
But that goes. It's a really good example, actually, of understanding what the board is doing. So I worked for one organization. I did some consulting work for them. And they asked me to come in and sort of, in that role, kind of give some third-party credibility to what's being developed internally. So I went in and did that with the board, and they were quite happy. And then I went and worked for that organisation as their sort of general manager of health and safety after that. And I went and presented something to the board, and the question came back with, well, who can we get third-party to sort of, give us that reassurance that this is right? And I'm like, hang on a second. 6 months ago, I was that reassurance. What's happened now? You're not prepared to listen to me. So you just got to kind of recognise it's nothing to do with you. It's just that's the way boards operate, right? They want that belt and brace.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It is. And so when you understand what their drivers are and what their job is and how they're supposed to do it, then you're more likely to be able to put things in a way that's going to resonate with them, that they're going to be more likely to listen to.
Yeah.
So, and in doing that, we talk about influencing skills, some sort of techniques around how to influence, and understanding those drivers and that kind of stuff. And we'd sort of do that we'd talk about that for board level, then executive level, then middle management level, and then with the workers, because they've all got different drivers and the communication is different, the techniques are different. So we talk through all those kind of things.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And then the final part is that piece about your credibility as an individual. Yeah. So I always leave that till the end, so that everybody's had a couple of days to get to know each other, so they can feel comfortable. Because it can be quite confronting if you actually go out there and say, "Well, I'm actually credible in what I'm doing."
So you leave that to the end. That's interesting, though, because I've always put it at the beginning. Yeah,
because I think the technical bit, I talk about the technical bit at the beginning in that strength of the argument piece, and that's people's comfortable space. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of leading them into it gently, and hopefully by the time we get to the end, as I say, which might be a bit confronting for you, you've now spent a couple of days with everybody, so you're feeling a bit, well, hopefully.
You're feeling a bit more comfortable.
If you've got a decent cohort of people in the training, you're feeling a bit more comfortable in sort of sharing some of those things and maybe saying, well, actually, I'm not very good at that, so maybe I'm not as credible as I think I am.
Yeah.
And so people open up a little bit to that. And so we talk there and things like, do you know how to create a health and safety strategy and supporting plan? What does your reporting look like so that you come across as credible in what you're presenting to people? What do you like at critical thinking so that you can hold your own in a smart discussion about these kind of things? How well do you lead a team? So again, this isn't safety specific. We do this across all disciplines where we promote people because they're good at their job rather than because they might be a good leader. And we fall short in that space. So what are you doing around leadership and those kind of things?
I was just thinking actually when you were talking, there's the technical aspect at the beginning, like you mentioned, but pretty much everything else after that is not industry or profession specific, is it? It's their generic skill sets, influencing, negotiating, listening, understanding people's values, what motivates them. I mean, you could apply that to any profession or any industry, really, couldn't you? So what you're doing is you're using these meta skills. And the more I talk to people from around the world, the more, and I was always kind of aware of it, but the more I'm really beginning to understand and value the meta skills of human interaction and human behavior, and human interpretation and perspectives. All these kind of meta ideas, they're so important, because without them, just having a very limited and narrow technical subset of skills, okay, maybe very valuable in a certain area, but you need more than that if you're going to make a holistic difference, because you need to be able to communicate those ideas, and you need to be able to reason those ideas. You need to be able to understand people's perspectives. You need to think critically, like you said, all these things in order to be able to get the message out there and get the business aligned with your objectives. The same as every business has got multiple objectives, and safety, you could argue, is, it doesn't bring money into the organization. It's a tough gig. You get all responsibility with no power. Everyone knows this who works in safety. So you have to have those negotiation skills. You have to have the communication skills that go with it. And that's what when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, was it last week, a couple of weeks ago, I really like this, because that aligns so much with my philosophy of safety as well, which is, and I'm not very good technically. Honestly, it's not the area that where my ability lies, but I understand that it's very important in the context of the organization. But it's those big communication skills and self-awareness skills and appreciation, and those are the types of things, those are the types of skills which are really important. So that's what. And how does that land with people? Because I'm assuming now, as you said, you get a very uncomfortable sometimes you get an uncomfortable feeling after you've gone over the technical side of things. How are people at the end of the 2 days?
Oh, the feedback has been phenomenal. It's been really, really positive. So generally positive. Like, I've had people say this is a career defining step for me.
Wow, cool.
One of the best 2 days I've done. But then the biggest thing is I've never done anything like this before.
Okay.
It's really helpful because it's something completely new for them.
Yeah.
And that was part of what I was doing when I built that as well. I was interested in doing it, but I didn't just want to go out and offer a health and safety course that anybody can get anywhere else, right? And just bring something slightly new.
Yeah. This actually reminds me of I was looking through your website earlier on, and a recent blog post you put up there, which is, will AI take over safety industry?
Yeah.
And I didn't get to read it all because I had to come out for this, but I'm assuming as well, it's a bad thing to do, to assume that aspects such as what we're talking about, influence and skills, communication skills, all that kind of stuff, are going to be one of the determinants whether AI can actually take over the safety industry. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's obviously who knows
Here it is.
where...
This is a review, isn't it?
Who knows where AI will take us? But at the moment, it's really, although it's progressing rapidly, it's still at that stage, as far as I can see, where it can do mundane tasks really well, but things which are a little bit more sophisticated. And then what I do in there is, because it was when ChatGPT first came, people first started talking about ChatGPT widely. So I just went in and I said, write me a safety policy. And it pumped out this safety policy for me, which was the kind of standard thing you see in every organization, right? And so I said, okay, write me a safety policy, and gave it some different prompts and said, takes into account safety differently and new view thinking, and sort of tried to get it to write something a bit more thoughtful. And it basically just produced the same thing, slightly reworded, right? It didn't do anything. So it struck me that, if you want to write a procedure for manual handling, a generic manual handling procedure, or generic return to work procedure, or whatever it might be, it's probably a good thing you just throw that in there. It spits it out. You can tidy it up a little bit and tweak it a little bit for your context, and then it's a useful tool. But something that's a bit more sophisticated at the moment, I don't think it's quite there yet. And those kind of leadership skills, influencing skills, that's obviously going to be something that's going to be way away yet.
Yeah, it's higher end complexity, isn't it? And I was thinking about this the other week. You look at what are termed as, and please, if you listen to this, don't take offense. I'm not trying to be offensive here, but if you look at, jobs which are perceived as low skill, which I personally don't think they are. Things like fast food service people and stuff like that. AI and technology hasn't taken over their particular job yet, because although it's deemed as being low skill, it's actually still very, very complex. Being able to take orders, being able to negotiate with staff, being able to deal with money, being able to deal with cards, being able to multitask all the things they have to do, especially if they're between the self-serve, service in the restaurant, and maybe the window service as well, the drive-through service, and all these different aspects give it the in-depth complexity that even those jobs at the moment haven't been replaced. I'm not saying they won't be, but you have to look at it from that perspective and say, okay, well, what humans bring to the table is a lot more complex than what might obviously be assumed, on the surface.
So that's really interesting, actually, because it brings one of the things I don't think we deal with very well in safety is complexity. And that's a really nice analogy there, right? Which is the bit that AI can deal with, which is based on algorithms and rules and process. The bit that can deal with is the simple stuff, not the complex stuff.
Yeah.
And if you shift that across into a safety sense, the stuff that rules, processes can deal with is the simple stuff and not the complex stuff. And it's that complexity which has driven, I think, the whole change in safety philosophy that we've seen over the last few years, right? Which is, how do you manage that complexity? Because rules don't work for that. So it's kind of a nice analogy there, I think.
And the irony is, it's been the advancement in technology which has made it more and more complex, but that the technology hasn't kept up with the complexity in order to be able to deal with it. That's, relies on us, I suppose, the most complex things that are out there at the moment. While we're on your website, why don't we give people a bit of a look around so that they're listening to what we're talking about, if they're in New Zealand or Australia, or I assume you have clients all over the world, or is that another assumption that I shouldn't be making?
That's another assumption. I have worked with clients all over the world, but most of it is sat in New Zealand because that keeps me plenty busy. But
Gotcha.
But always happy to deal with other people.
So we do have New Zealand subscribers as well. So this is likely to be someone in New Zealand watching this and think, okay, well, that sounds like, especially the 2-day workshop, that would be a good introduction to the leaders as well, to get them to look at some of the skills that are needed. When you were talking about that as well, I was thinking that would make a great way of introducing those skills that you're talking about, negotiation skills and influencing skills and self-awareness piece as well. That's a great introduction to these new view or HOP or safety differently philosophies, isn't it? Because it's not just a technical aspect, it's a philosophical aspect as well.
Yes.
So if they listen to this and they go, okay, well, that sounds like something that I'd want for my organization, the URL is going to be in the description below, but just talk through what people will find when they come to your website, and if you want to point them in any particular direction. I know you want to talk about your blogs and your book, but is it, and your services perhaps, where would you suggest people go first when they come to your website?
So that front page just talks, it kind of sets the approach to things, really. We talked about before about leadership, people and systems there. So you can't avoid those systems. So but what I like to do is make, I think you said it in your introduction, sort of committed people. So your workers, treating your workers well, listening to them, acknowledging their expertise. So you get committed people led well, and then supported by systems which are practical and pragmatic and helpful, and systemized where it needs to be systemized, but left alone where we don't need systems. We don't need systems necessarily for sort of core skills that people do. So so it's just balancing those things. So that first page really just sets the philosophy.
I was going to say, it's a fine balancing act, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So we've got those 3 elements you mentioned: the leadership, the people,
Yeah.
and the systems that are involved in that. Obviously, we can get in touch. He's got a LinkedIn section on there, but we'll probably put his LinkedIn post in there as well. Your books, so when you were writing these ideas, when you were transitioning from nuclear to non-nuclear, and you started jotting ideas down and what, and then so it was a presentation you were writing, wasn't it? And it just eventuated into a book, which is crazy for me to wrap my head around. But if people are interested in the book, what is the theme of the book? Like, what are you trying to get across in the book?
So it started as that. Here's some myths. Here's some things I think we don't do very well, and that we're basing on. So after a bit of an introductory piece, it goes through a sort of a myths and half truths kind of section, which just goes through some of these things one at a time and talks about zero harm. It talks about safety is our number one priority type of sloganeering and those kind of things that I think we ought to stop doing. So it goes through those, and then I thought I can't really say stop doing stuff without giving some ideas to what you should do instead. And so
fair call.
And so the sort of the third part of the book is around that, which is, okay, well, what do you do? What do you do? How do you change things, do things differently in your particular context? What are the components you need to do? And it sort of explores some of those things. It's really interesting because it was published in 2017.
Okay.
But I say, because it had been an on and off thing that had just been developed, it had been about 5 years in the making. And that's not because it's some kind of magnum opus. It's just because I put it down a little bit for 3 months and then pick it up again.
It's like this thick, and it's got like 2,000
exactly.
pages to it.
And so So it evolved at the same sort of time as the Safety Differently thing was starting to evolve. But when I was writing this, I'd never heard of Eric Holnagel or Sidney Dekker or any of those kind of people. So although at the end of it, I do say here's some other places to go, because by the time it was published, there was a few, there were some places to go and look at to get more information. So some of the language in it and the approaches are a little bit different from that Safety Differently viewpoint or the Safety 2 or the HOP viewpoint. But the thrust is the same. So it's quite interesting that we kind of came to the same ideas from
just
a different
language.
Parallel evolution, if you like, which I think is quite a positive thing.
Is there a revision or a second book in the making?
No, there isn't at the moment. I did start toying with the idea of sort of some just some good practical examples of what does this look like in practice, and getting people to send me examples of how they've done it so that we can share that with people. One of the things I found in this new view space, and I had the same feedback, heard the same feedback from the AHS Congress that was in Germany last week, and also from the Safety Innovation Summit that was in Australia back in February. Lots of theory talk, but not a lot of practicalities of how do you actually make that happen. And I think that's still the case. I think it's been the case for a while. And I set up a community of safety innovation here in New Zealand to try to get people to share those stories and get some of those examples and make people feel like they weren't ploughing a lone furrow on their own. But to get people to come forward with what's examples is really hard. I think people underappreciate that they are being innovative. I think they're kind of reticent to come forward because they think there's nothing special that they're doing. Yeah. Maybe there's that. It's strange, isn't it? Because that's what I've been doing as well since I've been in safety. As soon as I got into safety, I set up I was in government, and I set up a local government safety group, so that all leaders of local governments, I sent out probably 200-300 emails and just invited these people, said, look, we're all essentially doing the same job. We all essentially want the same outcome, and we all essentially working with similar systems and similar objectives. Why are we not collaborating, and why are we not gathering together and talking to each other about our problems and seeing who else has got a better solution? Because to me, it just seems like a no-brainer, to share these kind of things. And fortunately, there's a subset of about 30 people. We would gather and meet every 2-3 months, and I've been out of local government now for 5, 6 years, and the group is still going, and they still send me invites to their meetings as well, which is amazing. I love it. I love the fact they've kept it going. But that was part of my motivation as well for the Safety Differently book club here in Perth, WA, and mostly for this channel as well, which is we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's people out there who are doing great, amazing things, and let's all learn together. I didn't want this channel to be a combat ground where my idea is better than yours and your idea sucks because of X, Y, Z. That's not my modus operandi. My desire here is to bring people in and just talk about what they've done and how it worked for them, and let other people figure out if it's going to work for them as well. But you're right, some people are too humble. They don't think they're actually doing anything amazing. Talking to a few people, and it actually took me a while to convince them to come on, because they're like, I don't think I'm doing anything special. I'm just doing, and I'm like, what you're doing is amazing. And there's so much value you can bring to other people, but it's sometimes difficult, as you mentioned, to get that across the line, isn't it? How is your community of safety innovation going in New Zealand? It was going really well. It's been in abeyance a little bit recently, so we had some support, sort of administrative support to help us with the workload that we then lost. So I've been too busy to keep on top of it. So it has slowed down a little bit, but the intent is to relaunch that second half of this year.
Right.
I chatted to, we used to run sort of webinars and things. We've had some really great guests on talking about what they've been doing. And I chatted to Greg Smith about coming on recently, but it turns out he's in New Zealand in June anyway, doing a few seminars. So I'll just
nice.
Propose that for people. and then second half of this year, hopefully when I've got a bit more time, I can start bringing some of the things back together again.
Well, when you come around to getting it back together, give me a shout. I'll do everything I can at this end to help promote that as well, to get people to come on. And the more opportunities we have for people, as I said, the more opportunities we have for people to share, whether it be industry specific or generally, I think it's only good for everybody, to be honest with you. So I'll do everything I can from this end to help spread the word about that as well.
Yeah, appreciate it.
No worries. Why don't we have a quick chat about your blogs? Because I know you've got quite an interesting array of loud music, suspicious fire alarms, and real people. You see, that sounds like a book that I want to buy. It's like Colonel Mustard killed someone in the library with the candlestick holder.
Yeah,
some great titles here.
So my blogs are they're just random thoughts. So when I have a random thought that I think is useful, I'll write it down and I'll post it. So it's not a weekly or a monthly thing. It's fairly random. As and when. I try to put something in there which I hope is useful for people, not that they can take away and do something with. So it's quite interesting though. You look. I mean, I know you've done really well in getting your subscriber bases to this channel. It's pretty impressive. But I went back a couple of weeks ago and I looked at, because one of the things it gives you on. So I do this through WordPress. One of the things it gives you is the location of the people that have been reading it.
Yep.
And the list of countries around the world that people come and it's just astonishing. There's like 150 countries that people have come and read it from. It's crazy to me.
It's crazy. I use Wix website builder and blog platform, and because I write blogs as well and stuff, and every day I love it. I love jumping on and having a look where which country's been added to the list of people in India now. We've got people in Far Eastern Europe, South America, Alaska, Canada, and it's like it's a little bit of a hit when you see people from all over the world kind of coming on and having a look through your page, isn't it? It's awesome, but it obviously means it's bringing value to people all over the place, and the word's getting out there as well. So that's awesome. Are you and I didn't run this by you before we came on to record this, so there is absolutely no hard feelings if you don't want to talk about anything on these lines. We touched on a week or so ago and I don't want you to mention names or a specific case or anything along those lines, but you're quite heavily involved in being a special God, I can't remember the name now. Expert witness, aren't you?
So I've done a couple of bits. It's something I'm just starting to get to grips with, really. So I was in a recent case over here in New Zealand, which is quite a high profile one. It's very interesting because we spend a lot of time talking around the approach that we take, the philosophy we take, how we encourage workers to do things and not to do things, and how we investigate things, and actually when you sat in a courtroom and you're being cross-examined, it's a very different set of questions.
Right. Okay.
So we try to. I mean, I spend a lot of time saying to people that just don't think about this in terms of compliance. We need to worry about getting the right outcomes rather than being compliant. But you can't get away from the fact. It's unlikely that you're going to be prosecuted for something because there's so many businesses, and only so many inspectors around there. But when it does happen, you need to have things in place. And the court sets a lot less store by, we don't think we need to record this, than say to people.
Right. Okay. Okay.
It's
Is this getting into the realm of what Greg Smith talks about?
Yeah, and it's a lot of that with Greg's paper safe and the proving safety. And the proving safety thing actually is very, very relevant to that particular case that I was involved in most recently. But because the court process is an adversarial process, you're sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't, whatever you do. So if you say, we don't record people attending this briefing, then, well, how do you know they were there? How can you prove they were there? Where's your proof? But then if you do record the people, you say, well, that doesn't mean that they listened. It doesn't mean they understood. It just means they're there. So the whole thing is adversarial. It's very interesting, but it does put a different perspective on things. And anybody who's got the chance to listen to Greg talk about this stuff, take that chance. Because he's right. Yeah,
definitely. I've got a conversation with him coming up in a few weeks' time, I think. So we're going to get him on talking about his new book and and I see him quite a lot as well. Obviously, being here in Perth, Western Australia, there's a small contingency of people here, and we all sort of know each other. And he's definitely one. He's definitely one of the people who gets around a lot and talks about, brings his expertise from this legal realm into it. I remember first reading his book, Paper Safe, and thinking, wow, I had no idea how little importance the court would places on so much of what we class as safety.
Yeah, and it's a bit of both, isn't it? They place little importance on some of it, and then other things, you've written that down in your system, and then you didn't do it. So if you've written in your system, you're acknowledging that you think that's a reasonably practicable approach to take, and then you don't do it. You're hoisted by your own petard. So you've got to be really mindful of how you put these things together.
Exactly. I think that's Clive's argument, isn't it? About don't have an overinflated system because you're going to create more traps to get yourself trapped.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you've got to be really careful about how you do it, and and I talk about pruning your safety system regularly to make sure that that's one of the blog titles in there.
That's one of the blogs here, isn't it?
So encourage growth, remove deadwood. But yeah, that and how that proving safety is an interesting thing. I think one of the things that we've just done recently is I've been rewriting guidance on safety governance over here in New Zealand, which will hopefully launch in July. And that's trying to bring some of these thought processes into the governance space so that boards of directors are coming at it from the same angle as the safety professionals. So there's an interesting thinking going on in that space as well.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong here, when you said that, what I had in my mind was from your 2-day workshop as well, where you're trying to give the skill set to align the safety professional with the organization, with the C-suite in the organization. You also just mentioned there you want to start working on aligning the C-suite with what safety requires. Is that right?
Yeah. So one of the challenges we've got, I think, when we're dealing with at a board level, particularly, the majority of board directors, and it changes industry to industry, but most of them come from finance, legal, HR backgrounds. There's lots of accountants, lots of lawyers that sit on boards. Not a lot of necessarily detailed operations experience and understanding of health and safety. And so a lot of the people that I talk to, I say things like, why on earth are you still measuring lost time injury frequency rates? Just stop. And they say, well, the board insists on it. Mm-hmm. I think, well, so we're never going to make that change until we get boards to understand what they should be looking for in order to prove safety. And so we hopefully that increased guidance, which is much more around, what does good look like in this space, to give you a real good insight into that. So, and there's always a real danger that you go to an organization, you make a big difference, you make some changes, you improve things a little bit, then you get a new board or a new chief executive and everything changes and you've got no traction anymore. So we want to try, if everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet, we've at least got a realistic chance of taking things forward.
Yeah. And for people as well who are listeners, think, leaders can't make that much difference. With some very large public cases here that are all over YouTube, and how Safety Differently was not installed, but infiltrated, and how it worked through the organization and made some great strides. And then suddenly, one or two key changes at the top, and it killed all momentum of those particular good safety initiatives. It's amazing. And when you were talking then about, having people at that C-suite level who come from finance backgrounds, who come from legal backgrounds, very rarely from operational backgrounds as well, you're dealing with a subset of people who are very analytically motivated, and that's how they see the world as well. In especially with finance and law as well, they could probably put forward a very good argument for keeping LTI, and it does provide us with a certain level of reassurance, because we haven't killed anybody, or we are reducing the amount of people who are taking time off. What it doesn't do, it doesn't look at the bigger picture behind that and goes, okay, well, how are you doing that? What are the effects of that? Are you just lucky, or is this a natural trend of your organization and the industry over time? There's all these other critical perspectives that actually looking at LTIs. You could do what Josh Bryan did and just take it away from the front line and just keep it with the board.
I took it out of our board report and nobody noticed for 6 months. So
where's the value if they don't notice?
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things, and we get this a lot with statistics and metrics, right? It gives this kind of false sense of security, and it makes things seem like they're accurate, and it makes them seem like they're definitive when they're not. And it's, it does have a kind of a reassuring simplicity, that sort of accident data rate. And when you look underneath the hood, it's really quite, in some cases, worse than doing nothing. Exactly. But it does have that simplicity, and if people don't understand what sits behind it, they're never going to support you in getting rid. And so that's why we want to get that
education level.
Yeah.
I remember being called into this when I first started in consultancy. I got pulled into an organization. They were a construction mob here in WA, and they were going through a boom, which housing industry over here at the moment is all time. I mean, you're waiting years and years for houses, and they're going through a similar boom, and they're saying, look, we've gone from 10 people to 50 people, in the past, 6 months, and we want to have a good safety management system behind it. We want to be able to report on LTIs. And I went, well, hold on just a second. I said, I can do all of that and set you up for LTIs and destroy any safety culture that you currently have.
Yeah.
And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, just because you're able to report on LTIs doesn't mean you've got a good safety culture, or doesn't mean you're even any good at safety. You can hide figures. If you motivate people the wrong way, and you'll never hear about injuries or instances and all this kind of stuff. And if you actually reward people for not having injuries as well, which is a terrible thing to do, then guess what? You won't hear about those as well. So we can drive your LTI down through the floor, and it'll just make you a worse safety organization. I was only being that brutal with them just to emphasize what people want isn't necessarily what people need. And having that education piece, like you said, for that C-suite, that's definitely going to be really important for that. What was that? What was that saying? And not everything worth measuring is important. Not everything important gets measured. Something along those lines.
Yeah, not everything that matters can be measured, and everything
that measures
quite often with measurements, like we default to the information that we've got or that's easy to get, rather than actually what's meaningful, because sometimes that's harder to do.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
The whole tyranny of metrics thing.
All right. So what's going on now for you, Craig? Obviously, you're going to the UK for a holiday, even though you're not really doing much at the moment in New Zealand. You're already in holiday mode, but you're off to the UK, and then what happens when you get back from that?
And then I will be looking to organise my next of these workshops, these 2-day workshops, when I get back. And then I've actually got quiet time lined up for the next wee while. So, which is unusual because I've been completely flat out for 2 years since I started my own business. And so actually it's quite nice to have a bit of time. So what I'm going to spend some of that time doing until the phone rings, which it probably will, I'm actually developing some online training content so that I can get that up there.
I was just looking at your email from earlier. I was just trying to remember what it was that you're going to be working on, but it's the online content, isn't it?
So I've got all these scoped out sheets full of what I want to deliver, and I've got to distill that down into actually some content, and then at the end I've got to make some videos, which is going to be horrific, but I'll look to your example as to how you can do them well.
Don't look over here for any examples. I'm the last person you should look to. Is this going to turn into a book though, Craig? Because I can sense a book coming as well.
I don't know that it'll turn into a book. We'll see. Probably not. I'm not sure I want to go through that again.
Well, Craig, we're at the hour mark, and it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, sir. It's good having a fellow Englishman on the show again. There's not enough of us, but it's been awesome talking to you. Thank you very much. If you could hang around for just a moment, I'll just say goodbye to people, and then I'll have a quick catch up with you at the end. But thank you again so much. I very much appreciate it, Craig. Well, everybody, Craig Marriott, currently living in New Zealand, from the UK, profound, extensive knowledge in nuclear process safety cases, and now he's moving into for a while now the area of occupational safety, and how those two worlds, between expectations, between processes, between humanistic systems, holistic approach, how they all come together, and how to make them practicable for people to be able to pick them up and say, okay, well, let's give this a try. Let's see whether this can make a dent, whether this can make an improvement in our organization. So jump onto his website. If you're in New Zealand as well, I'm sure he'll be more than happy to reach out to you, come and meet you, have a coffee. And have a look through his website as well. Lots of info there on blogs, and even get his book. As he said, he wrote it all before the popular lexicon of Safety 2 and HOP and Safety Differently came out. Be interesting read to see how he perceived those ideas and philosophical approaches before this common parlance and the lexicon was actually formed around what it is now. So glad to have been bringing you more people from around the world, and thank you so much to everybody who tunes in and watches it. It's very much appreciated, and hope to see you the next one. Thank you.